Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be discussing the social and ethical implications of technology and how technology is impacting us as a society today. So why does social and ethical implications matter? Basically, we're just looking at how technology is impacting us and affecting us overall as a society. How is it changing our day to day lives, and what is being considered when these systems and IT devices are being created. So, overall, everyone uses technology, so that means social and ethical issues of technology have an impact on all of us. So, first, we're going to get into our social implications. So, this is basically looking at how technology is going to be affecting or impacting us as a community, as individuals, within our everyday life. And this pretty much looks at any changes that we have in the different areas of our lives, such as education, employment, your everyday norms as an individual, and other things. So we'll look at some of those areas now. So these are going to be some of your most common social impacted areas of technology. For example, job displacement is starting to become a social concern as technology is starting to take over some industries, especially with the usage of robots in factories, AI taking over some roles. So it's basically eliminating human labor in some areas. Um, you know, your mental health. So social media, the development of social media has led to an uh, increased cases of things of anxiety and depression and suicidal thoughts because of the exposure of what social media brings. So that has an impact on the overall mental health of individuals. And you also have, misinformation. So, of course, now with AI and deepfakes, there's a lot of media and content that is being created and spread that is, basically false. It's not true, but it's hard for people to basically determine if it was real or not. So, these are some of the common social impacts that we are currently seeing with technology and that could be potentially impacting your life directly. So, we're going to go ahead and take an example of social implications so you can kind of get an idea of what it is and how it's applied. So let's consider Uber and DoorDash, right? Uber and DoorDash have the ability to allow people to get jobs pretty much as they need them. So, you could sign up for DoorDash today and start working in 3 hours. So it's very easy to get a job and it's easy to earn money through these apps like Uber and DoorDash. However, what social implications should be considered in this case? So, although these apps are useful, they do have social implications that need to be considered. So, let's consider these different social impacts. We have job insecurity. One that would be looking at the fact that those jobs don't have any benefits, such as, retirement funds or any health insurance. And they also don't provide a stable income because it is a first come, first served basis. And, your work and your money that day depends on how many people are requesting that service at that time. Another issue would be the controls that are in play on the actual apps. So when it comes to the actual IT systems behind the app that are assigning these different routes for these workers to go on, they have favoritism over the people that work longer days more often than those who may just need to do it every now and then, as well as economic inequality because it's basically replacing your traditional employment. So, if there are people who are spending their time here in this form of employment, then there is a lack of employment within your traditional spaces, for example, retail and the grocery stores and fast food, which is also leading to where you may see, where signs say short staff. They're losing a lot of people to these easy temporary jobs. And it's also just impacting, everyone around in the community. So, it's affecting more traffic because more people are driving. There's a higher demand for delivery now, which means there's need for more people to be on the streets delivering more often. And it just puts a strain on public service overall. So when I'm talking about public service, I'm basically referring to the stores that are doing the delivery service. So, whether that be McDonald's, with the easy demand of having DoorDash, McDonald's is now seeing an influx of orders on top of their drive through and their walk ins that, they just don't have the capacity to fully handle it. So, these would all be examples of social impacts of technology. So when you are designing tech socially, you need to think about a few things. So that would be including inclusive design, so making sure it that everyone can use it. It's made for everyone. You need to consider that the impact it's going to have on the community, as well as sustainability. So how is it going to be sustained? Also think about ethically. How can you consider your ethics in that part? And you also want to also consider the empowerment versus exploitation. So you want to make sure that your technology is basically empowering and it's not trying to exploit anything from people. And overall, you just want to make sure that any tech that is being designed is always considering the good in society and is not going to do any harm long term. So now we will take a look at the ethical implications. So ethical implications are going to be looking at, the moral values of different things or the consequences that could be arising from these issues. So how technology is designed, how you use it, and how is it deployed. So when you're thinking about ethical aspects of technology, you need to ask yourself the following questions. First, is it fair? Is this technology fair to everyone? Who benefits or is harmed by this technology? Are everyone's rights respected? And who is responsible if something goes wrong? So these are all areas you need to think about if you ever decide to, develop any technology, and or if you feel like a technology resource that you're using may not be ethical. You can ask yourself these questions and see if you believe that technology is made for you or not. So, looking at these ethical implications of technology, there are various areas that are very important and need to be considered when creating and or using technology. So, first, bi- bias and discrimination. So, is that technology biased to a specific group, a cultural, ethical group? Does it have any discrimination involved with it? And there have been talks of certain AI systems having bias for different cultures. So that's one example. Looking at privacy and consent. So when these technology devices and websites are basically collecting user data, do they have the right to do so, or did the user consent to them? Accountability and transparency. So, is there someone who's going to take up for this technology and accept any consequences that may happen due to it? Or is it transparent and is the technology telling us exactly what we need to know as a user to feel safe? Um, Autonomy and manipulation and access and equity are all going to be, these ethical considerations when it comes to technology use. So, when you're thinking about ethical concepts overall, these are the primary areas that you would need to consider. So, that would include fairness, privacy, the bias, accountability, consent, and accessibility. So, again, when developing or working with anything ethical, you want to make sure that all of these concepts are considered to ensure that ethically, whatever service you're providing or whatever technology device you're using is providing, these key ethical concepts in some way, and they have been um, used accordingly. So, you're basically ensuring that there's privacy, you're ensuring that it's fair, you're ensuring there's no bias, you're ensuring there's consent, etc. So these key concepts are very important to ensure that everything that is going on with technology is ethical. So here we have some current concerns. So again, like I mentioned a few slides ago, bias in algorithms in the AI system, they're made for certain populations. Transparency in decision making. So is a site telling you the truth that you need to know for you to make the correct decision? Privacy and data collection. So, making sure that your data is protected, as well as that you give consent and you have the ability to control consent in your data. And accountability for outcomes. So, again, who is going to be responsible if something bad happens due to technology use? So overall, when you're creating IT or you're using, IT software, you need to consider the following. So who's going to benefit from this? Who's going to be harmed? What data is going to be used? How is it going to be collected? How is it going to be stored? Is consent clear? So did you give the user the right information they need to know to feel safe to give consent? Can they take their decision back? And are you being transparent? So, all of these areas you want to make sure you're considering, and you're trying to make sure that whatever you're providing to users is ethical, and that that you have their best interests at heart so that they feel safe using your product. So, also, again, in the case of this course, you may not be creating IT. However, you will be using IT. So these are still things you can consider. And you can also still consider these if you decide to make any sort of product or service in the future. So now let's look at an example of an ethical implication. So we're going to be looking at a scenario that basically has a company using an AI tool to screen resumes. And this AI algorithm that's being used has a favoritisms towards certain candidates from certain places, and basically penalizes any gaps in employment. So, what ethical concerns should be considered in this case? So first, we want to consider that there's bias. So this AI model is basically putting a disadvantage on underrepresented groups. So if that group did, or that person did not go to these set colleges, they basically will be disqualified, which is not fair, which leads to fairness. People who are qualified may be excluded from the pool just due to the information they have on their resume, or where they came from, or their experience. It also isn't being transparent. So many times the applicants don't know why they're being rejected, because the AI systems are basically going through these resumes and filtering out based on, needs of the company. But also, we need to consider who would be accountable. So, yes, the company is using this system. However, did the company know of these restrictions that were placed in the algorithm? Did they have a part? Did they request it? Are they the ones who did it? Or did the AI developers do it? These are still questions that need to be asked. So, this would be an example of who would be responsible and accountable for that technology service that is being provided. So here are some common trade-offs that you would have in tech design overall, considering the social and ethical aspects that come into play. So generally, these would be what you see competing, or when tech companies are creating a software, this is what they're looking at. So they're looking at accuracy versus fairness. So although it's providing an accurate service, is that service fair? Should it be done? Although it is helpful, how is it harming people, basically? Convenience versus privacy. So, yes, data collection is convenient to these users, but how is their privacy being impacted? Then you have automation versus human judgment. Yes, automation can be helpful because it, basically decreases the need for human labor. However, there are certain areas that might still need a human's judgment other than a computer's judgment. So, how would that be determined? And then innovation versus regulation. So, you know, you creating something that's out of the box and new, but also ensuring that there are some protections legally that are in play when you're doing these to make sure that everyone is protected and nobody is at a disadvantage. So, when it comes to ethical considerations, there are some frameworks that can be followed that will allow you to have some questions that could guide you into making the correct ethical decision. So, the first one is utilitarianism framework. So, that's basically using the question, what action produces the most good? Would it be this case or would it be this case? You also have the deontology framework. So, the question that is based around this framework is, are we following moral rules or duties? So, are you doing the right thing morally for the greater good? Are there any moral rules that, basically are set in stone that are being violated? Things of that nature. You have the rights-based framework. So that's just looking at the overall rights of the user. Are they being protected? Are they being impacted? And if so, what is being impacted? You have the virtue ethics framework, and the guiding question for that would be, what would a good person do? So if, there was no evil in the world, what would be the ideal action and outcome of that action? And lastly, you have the justice and the fairness framework. So, are the outcomes distributed equally? So, is justice being served and is it still being fair? And all of these are good uh, overall guiding questions and frameworks that you can use, again, outside of technology, but just to make sure that ethically the right things are being done. And of course, you can use more than one framework together to ensure that you're ethically consider all scenarios. So when it comes to applying these frameworks to real cases, first you want to identify what the ethical issue is at hand that needs to be considered. And then you would look at the values that are in the conflict. So going back to that uh, common design or the common trade-offs for design, privacy versus convenience, human judgment versus automation, what values are being considered in the conflict. And then you analyze that impact. So what impacts does this issue have? What could this do to your everyday world or society? And then provide a recommended solution using one of these frameworks, selecting the framework, applying it to the solution, and basically once you have that, you just have to communicate it clearly, which is basically, here's a solution and here's how I think it can be done. So overall, using those ethical frameworks will allow you to ensure that ethically everything is being considered, nobody's being left out, everyone's being included, and it overall is good for the public good. All right, so what did we cover today? Today we covered social and ethical implications. So we're basically looking at how technology can impact us socially as a community and ethically. So we're also looking at how we can ensure that social social aspects and ethical aspects are always being considered with technology and the designing of technology. So we're also looking at our ethical concerns and applying ethical frameworks to figure out if a technology is ethical and if it's considering, the human good over harming humans. So these are all areas that are very important today, especially with the development of new technologies, and it should always be considered whether you're a user or a developer of technology. So hopefully you learned something new today, and you could use these frameworks to apply it to your everyday needs as well. So I look forward to seeing you all in the next video.